Hey, Bruce Timm, tell me the favorite comic that you've ever drawn.
Favorite comic that I've ever drawn would probably be Dennis the Menace or Charlie Brown.
You did those two?
Way back as a kid, probably.
We should clarify for any listeners out there that this is not the Bruce Timm. This is just Bruce Timm.
Oh, I know what you were referring to now. And I did not ever draw Batman. And even though one time someone called the church and asked if I have drawn the comic Naughty and Nice, don't look that up on the internet, I did not.
See, I was
Have
hoping
you-
that this would be an introduction to the circuit pastors, and I think we're off to a good start right now.
Have you ever been contacted by CPH to do comic drawings for them?
No. No.
That's a missed opportunity.
Well, not if they saw my drawings.
Name recognition is everything. I mean, it's a missed opportunity. We'll work on that.
My question for you, David, is do you believe the Septuagint myth? And just to clarify, here's the story. We need to translate the Old Testament from Hebrew into Greek. So let's pick 70 people independently, put them in separate rooms, have them translate it. My goodness, they translate it, they come out, it's the exact same words for every single book of the Old Testament. Do you buy it?
I don't. Although I shouldn't be as much of a skeptic. I should be less of a skeptic. So let's say. Give me the time frame. When does this happen? When are we working in history here?
This is second century BC, isn't it?
Right.
Is that
it's second Temple Judaism. Right.
Yeah. Now, my question is related to Genesis 10. Bruce, did you count how many nations there are listed in the table of nations here?
I did, although I did some reading because there is debate about how many are actually listed.
So tell me, what's the debate?
Well, at least among the church fathers, Augustine thought there was 73, and then I did some reading in Leupold, and he said it doesn't matter. Some has gone as few as 68, but I counted twice. My math's really bad, but I got 70.
Well, you split the difference, right? So somebody said 68, somebody said 73. 70, that's the average. That sounds good. 70 nations. What you got?
Did you have any sense, Bruce, of where that variation could be introduced? Is it who's not getting counted or who's getting counted twice?
So I'm trying to think. Under Japheth, I believe 7 sons are listed, but some had 8, and I don't know. I didn't look in the Hebrew if there's a textual variant. So in Leupold, and at least as I added him up in him, he had I think 18 under Japheth, and the number I got was 14. No, he had 15, and I got 14. And then he had 27 under Shem. And so whatever that, and I think 31 for Ham. Those were his 3 numbers, 15, 31, and 27. And he got 73.
I get 14 for Japheth too, so I think Leupold is just wrong. Yeah.
And 30 for Ham. And so he had one more, and I wonder maybe he included the sons in the families. So if he would have included the sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth, that would have got 73. But the descendants would have been 70. If I couldn't figure out his counting.
So here's my question about something like this, the number 70. On the one hand, it's an exercise in noticing. Like, notice how 70 appears so commonly in the scriptures, right? And that's helpful in terms of narrative, connecting things together. So, this is great when you're teaching the scriptures. What Bible stories does it remind you of? Where else does the number 70 show up, right? So for recall, that's helpful. But I suspect that we want to say more, right? Like that the number 70 means something. So Josh, what does the number 70 mean?
So 7 days the week, right? So God rests on the 7th day. And I think everybody knows this from the time they're a child if they go to church and they go to Sunday school, right? That seven's the number of God. And is it Augustine who says it's the Trinity plus the four corners of the earth? So it's this totality. And we have this in church, right? 7 candles on a lot of lampstands, or 3, either one, they have significance. So 7, that's God's number, and then 10 is, and lots of places, but we're talking about genealogies, and the structure of Genesis, it's structured around these things called toledotes, and it's just translated as these are the generations. There are 10 of those in Genesis. So 7 times 10, you get 70. So it's God's providence among the nations is what I would read that number to be.
Does that hold then with? Go ahead, Josh or Bruce.
Don't you also, I mean, and again, the completeness, but you have, 12 times 12 times 10 times 10, in at least in simple math, 0 to 9, the number of digits. I mean, there is a completeness in 10 as a multiple.
For sure. Yep.
So you've got the number of God and a sense of completeness. How does that hold with the other instances of 70? So we've got what? 70 descendants of Jacob make their way to Egypt.
Right. So the picture then would be it's the new world coming into Egypt, being born in Egypt, which certainly lines up with Hosea and Matthew, right? Out of Egypt I have called my son. So this is the new creation.
And that then fits really well with the sending of 70 disciples. And 2 by 2, right?
And 2 by 2 setting it up with the flood, exactly, right? I love it. He sends them out like animals. My question is, did they self-identify? Did they pick their spirit animal when Jesus sent them out 2 by 2?
Almost certainly. Now, so I'm thinking also about other instances. You've got like Elijah in the wilderness, and you've got the Lord has preserved 7,000, right? Which is like 70 on steroids. 7,000 who've not bent the knee.
Right. Yeah. So it's like it's an even bigger world that God is preserving. Like so he's like, all you need is 70. Actually, Jesus is like, all you need is 2 or 3. But I'm going to give you 7,000.
You also have forgiveness, which again is the bringing of the new into the world, bringing of God's family into the world. However you do that, if it's 70 times 7 or 77.
Yeah, so talk to me about that. So if it's either way, same numbers, you have 70 and 7. So if we're taking 70 as the number of nations, so let's take it as shorthand for the world, and then you've got the number of God. That's what Jesus' sacrifice is, a perfect sacrifice for all the sins of the world.
I think this is where it can be fun to just, as David often does, run the number or just ask the question, what does this 70 remind you of, and run it through the scriptures and pull your theology together. In a way, you don't need to add some symbolic interpretation. You can just hang the Bible stories together and it happens.
So the next Bible story is, at what age should Bruce Timm retire?
Well, I would say 70 based on what we've talked about, but I don't know that I want to work that long.
How many more years you got, big fella?
Hey, the perfect number. In 7 years, I'll be 70.
That's providence.
Bruce, I would never have accused you of being a 63-year-old man. Never would have said that of you.
Well, thank you.
Me too, but for different reasons.
Yeah, I'm not thanking you.
So I mean, the Bible. Back to this question about arithmetic. The Bible loves arithmetic, and the significance of numbers, because it's of course not just the numbers, but the operations that the Bible takes stock of. So when you square a number, right, you're multiplying it in a superabundant way, right? Instead of just adding it up arithmetic, and have a linear series, you have exponential growth when you start doing exponents. So the 70 times 7, right? Or 12 times 12. This squaring implies superabundance. And there's something about like Pentecost being 7 by 7 plus 1, the 8th day after 7 sevens. There's like nothing. What could be more fulfilled than that, right? What could be more superabundant than that?
Nothing.
So now this is reminding me of a conversation we had a few weeks ago, Josh, about measuring things. And this is something that's been on my mind an awful lot lately. So I said before my sermon on Sunday, because I want to talk to my congregation about goals. And on the one hand, there are these kind of external markers, right? So if nobody's coming to church on a Sunday morning, there's nobody in the pews, or let's take a more reasonable example. Let's say you've got 500 people on your rolls, and there are 20 people in church on a Sunday morning. Okay, you measure that and you say something's wrong here, right?
Hey, how many of those are getting Social Security checks?
Of the 20 or of the 500?
Of the 500, just
Of the 500.
related question. Now, I heard what you said. So your goal is to have 100% church attendance.
That's right. That's my goal. Now, right. What's interesting is it's not attainable, right? Because stuff comes up, right? People go to church elsewhere when they're on vacation, or they are in the hospital, so they can't come to church. So that's not attainable. And really, I should qualify that, right? It's not that's not actually the goal. That would be the ideal, right?
Yeah, but is it good to qualify things like this? So I had a conversation with somebody, and they said, "Oh, I'll see you on Sunday," unless something comes up. And it made me want to say, why would you say that? Because that's a given. You're just then looking for an excuse.
That's good. The excuse or the qualification lets people off the hook when, so it alleviates the burden of proof, that's fair enough. So good. I only felt like I should have qualified it because it made people a little bit antsy to hear me say that. And of course, I'm saying this to the group of people who are in church on Sunday, and most of them who are there every Sunday, right? So they don't have any reason to be antsy about this. I'm not saying you're not doing good. Okay, but here's the thing. On the one hand, that external metric is useful. It can serve as an indicator, right? It's not the end all, the be all end all. The be all end all, as somebody told me this week, very helpfully, is are you doing the work? Are you doing the things that would produce faithful church attendance, right? If anything would. Okay, so bad strategy would be to offer everybody some incentive to come to church. $1,000, you can fill the pews. That's unfaithful, right? Okay, but here's the thing I was getting at is 70 for Jacob, 70 for the Table of Nations, 7,000 for the population, against the population of the world, is a minuscule number, relatively speaking. And yet, qualitatively speaking, it's perfect. It's the perfect number. Right? My sheep hear my voice. We're not going to lose a single one of them.
Wow. So you've really reduced it down. See, I used to think that the ideal number for a church would be 120 and 153 at a maximum, playing with the fish. But now you've convinced me we need to shut this down. It needs to be 70.
Well, so you need 120 if not everybody's coming to church every Sunday. But if you had 70 people who came to church every Sunday,
so then you're missing a Pentecost, a 50 every Sunday. That's what you're banking on because they're spreading like wildfire out into the world. See, now we're cooking with fire.
Yeah, that's a very optimistic view of those 50 who aren't in church, that they're spreading the fire out in the world.
Good. There's my pessimism that I wanted. Now, here's my question for you, Bruce. Do you enjoy making people squirm in the pews?
Yes and no. I mean, sometimes when I'm preaching and it's like, do I want to say that? And then I just remember our rule that you have to. Although I think I might have told you guys maybe a couple of months back, I preached, it was probably Epiphany on the wedding at Cana. And one of my members said I visibly took a deep breath after the sermon was finished because I could see the squirming on marriage and divorce and all sorts of things.
Was it invigorating though?
I don't know. I think it was more like, how can you say it? Felt like it was the faithful thing to do, but I don't know that there was a lot of, you felt good in that you did what you should do, but I would say it wasn't fun, and even though my personality, I do like to make people uncomfortable, it did not stimulate that. All right. Just don't go anywhere with that.
I won't. I was going to ask you if you want a pair of salmon pants next.
I've always thought about ordering a pair.
You should. I might wear mine tomorrow. I don't know. We'll see. So 70, David, we skipped a big one in Exodus, and this one gets overlooked. But after the Exodus, they stop by the springs of Elim, and there's 70 palm trees, and there's 12 springs of water. And it's like once you start noticing these numbers, it's just too obvious of a picture, but it's really beautiful. First of all, we're not dismissing the literal sense of the text. What we're acknowledging is God set it up this way, and Moses is just writing it down.
Yeah, yeah, that's right. Are there also 70 elders in Exodus? And Exodus 24, Moses, come up to the Lord, you and Aaron and Nadab and Abihu and 70 of the elders of Israel. So when God wants to convey that here you are representative of the whole people. I mean, so this is interesting because you would think, so Genesis 10, the table of nations, this is the entire population of the globe. This is everybody, the ethnoi and the Judaioi, right? God's people and the nations. And what's remarkable, noteworthy, is that number 7 and 70 gets applied to God's people, or it has its application within God's people, within the house of Israel, as a light to the nations, right? So completeness is found in and among God's people, right?
Yeah. Bruce, what's your favorite biblical genealogy?
I don't remember a lot about it, but the exiles in Ezra. I'm just being honest, you guys. But I'm trying to think. I believe it's in Nehemiah. I'm not sure. Ezra or Nehemiah or one of the epistles that Paul wrote. No.
Oh,
and
this is old guys at ordination. Somewhere in the Bible it says this.
Right.
Hey,
but there is
that's biblical too. Somewhere it says.
I know.
There is a list of the the exiles who've returned to Jerusalem, and one of them is called Lefty, and his name is Lefty. So I just like that, because when you read, one of the things whenever you read a genealogy, it's kind of like, in a way, it's going like to a graduation ceremony or something you got to attend, and you read through the names, and what do you look for? You look for the name, or so it's your nephew or your son, or you're going to your 5th grade band recital and it's clarinet squeaking and all that stuff, and you look at the program and you're proud that whatever your daughter is first chair clarinet or whatever. So yeah, I think that's there's a lot of interest in the names, no matter what the genealogy is, and if you can get more information about them. I mean, it's very much like this number. I mean, there's God hangs it all together, and there's a story.
That's great, and very relevant for Genesis 10, right? Because when you read Genesis 10, most of the names are unfamiliar, and yet some are strikingly familiar, right? So like among the people of Ham are the most familiar names: Egypt and Canaan, right? And Nineveh. This was making me think about the comparison that we did in Genesis 4, the 4 and 5, the comparative genealogies of Cain and Abel. And you had remarked, Josh, about the relative growth of the godless, right? And you have the same thing here, right? So where do the empires come from? Who gets to occupy the land flowing with milk and honey, right? So here you are, Shem, and you've heard that Ham has been cursed, and you're like, but Nimrod is coming from that guy, right? And they're living in the land flowing with milk and honey.
For the record, Bruce, the answer I was looking for was Matthew chapter 1.
Okay. Wouldn't be the first thing I got wrong that you asked me.
That's fine. That's the only answer. But yeah, you're right. So David, in this Ham's that's really worth diving into, because these are the people who are going to be enslaving God's people throughout the most of the Old Testament. So certainly the Canaanites, the Egyptians, and also the Philistines. are in verse 14, and they come from Egypt. So this really helps typologically if we understand that the Philistines come from the Egyptians. So every time you have the Philistines oppressing the Egyptians and you have a leader rise up, this is a replay of the Exodus.
Say that again. Every time you have the Philistines oppressing the Egyptians?
Sorry.
The Israelites.
The Israelites.
The Israelites. Okay. That's what I thought you meant. Okay.
Yep,
Yeah.
that's what I meant.
Replaying
Yeah.
the Exodus. Yeah. They're it's kind of like the ephod is the Ark of the Covenant, mobile Ark of the Covenant. The Philistines are the mobile Egyptians.
That's good.
Try
They're
to channel a little James Jordan here.
They're the iOS of the Egyptians, where the Egyptians are the operating system on your desktop. How was that? Is that good for Zoomers? So we apply one. So Goliath, Philistine, he would be a new type of pharaoh.
Yeah.
And before I forget it, Bruce, so you know the deal with Benjaminites, right? Talking about left-handed people.
Inform me.
Well, it's like every time there's a Benjaminite listed in the Old Testament, they're left-handed. And the pun is Benjamin means son of my right hand.
Okay.
So Ehud, the judge.
Yep.
Right?
I like him.
Patron saint of lefty. He's a Benjaminite. And he stabbed that fatty to death. His name was Eglon. Doesn't that name just sound fat? Eglon?
Yes, it does. I learned that a couple of my grandchildren are left-handed, which is kind of weird if it skipped a generation or something. But
you also get 700 left-handed men at the end of Judges. 700 of them.
Oh, look at that. 700. 70 times 10. Holy smokes.
Could be left-handedness as a sign of perfection and completeness.
I wouldn't go that far. That's typology gone crazy. Anything else on the sons of Ham?
Well, what do you guys think of Nimrod? It seemed like again, I read a little bit of the church fathers from the ancient Christian commentary this morning, and they had kind of mixed reviews on Nimrod, that he was a tyrant and a despot. And I guess I don't know that I see that, but that he kind of became the first king, and that's what they said anyways.
I think it's noteworthy that you don't have to be a tyrant to be a wicked king. And in fact, you can be a wicked king who is a very good ruler, right? So I often reflect, we'll get this next time in Genesis 11, but Babel was not at least it's not presented as a den of vice, right? Everybody's working together. They're collaborating well. So here's a man, a mighty hunter before the Lord. Everybody speaks well of him. So we're glad to follow him into the land of Shinar, right? He may well have been. I mean, so like think Alexander the Great, It's like or Julius Caesar, right? Phenomenal, like mighty men, still godless, right? And what they create doesn't last, but nonetheless, not necessarily tyrants,
Do you think David's mighty men then is a play off of this, like a positive aspect of what it would be to have mighty men? And of course, there's a twist in David's because Uriah is listed, which always kind of hits you in the gut.
Right. Yeah. David's mighty men are loyal, fiercely loyal to him. Right. Yeah. They're not going and building their own cities.
So all of these kingdoms that come from Nimrod, because he goes into Assyria and builds Nineveh, and we all know about the wickedness of Nineveh. I mean, this guy was incredibly productive in not a great way. I mean, it calls it a great city, but we all know how cities are.
We want to stay away from the places with tall buildings, yes.
But there does seem to be some ambiguity, at least here. So if we don't have the rest of the story about Babel or Nineveh or Assyria, then I don't know if we could make a real clear judgment about Nimrod's character. But I could see why the church fathers would want to do so.
And how many generations down is Nimrod? It goes Ham, Cush, Nimrod. So he's grandson of Ham, which is really not that far removed. Right?
Right. And it's notable he doesn't come from Canaan. There's so Nimrod, Minnesota, right? And I've got some members who've got a hunting cabin up there, and one of their neighbors has a hunter on their like entrance to their house or something like that, and clearly an allusion back to this.
Yep, I hunted around Nimrod with my dad, so I know the place well.
Now, here's
There's
the deal,
not much
though.
there.
If I called you a Nimrod, Bruce, would you take it as a...
Yeah, I don't think that's a good compliment. I mean,
you know where that comes from, though, right? Is that Bugs Bunny called Elmer Fudd a Nimrod because he was making fun of his hunting abilities, and
That's
so
awesome.
that's the origin of the insult, you Nimrod.
I did not know that. Thank you for educating me on pop culture. That's good. I come to David Buchs for all my pop culture education.
Everything pre-1950 I could do for you.
Can you tell me about Pluto the dog?
No, I can't.
Well, that was the 30s. You're a liar. Okay, David, do you want to talk about the... Oh, you've got Sodom and Gomorrah under Canaan. That is significant. And Gaza is listed in verse 19 as a place reference. I mean, these places just keep coming up over and over and over again, not only in the scriptures, but in our modern day too.
Yeah. I'm thinking about how prosperity is a very genial thing. Like, right? So here they are in this place that is conducive to life. And so wickedness has a chance to develop because scarcity is not causing people to like kill each other for disorder to like enter into maturity, and consequently, like vice has a chance to really ramp up. So isn't this the case that the sins of Sodom and Gomorrah, these are also the sins of like luxurious Greece? When you get men who are have too much leisure, right? They end up in the sins of Sodom and Gomorrah.
And they are wanting to uncover nakedness, just like Ham does. So it's you're right. It's the sins of the fathers getting passed down.
Yeah, and it's almost as though you are handed over to your desires by means of prosperity. This is a shocking fact about the world, that that when you get what you want, it might be the end of you.
Is it true? What kind of bee, or is it a wasp? If they sting you, they die. Is that
I think it's just a straight honeybee. I mean, I
don't know, but we all know that story, right? So I think that's a perfect illustration.
You get what you want, and then you die.
And it's done out of rage, right?
Right.
But there's a positive aspect to a bee, because Deborah will be likened to a bee in the book of Judges. So the positive thing about a bee is that they're fierce, so they know how to protect, but they also produce something sweet like honey. Now, David, do you know which recording artists' fans are called the Beehive?
No, I don't.
That would be
the Bee Gees.
Beyonce.
Yeah, okay, all right. I'm just glad I didn't say Justin Bieber.
Those are the Beliebers, aren't they?
So the last time I paid close attention to pop music was 1997 is kind of like a turning point in my life, and the boy band Hanson was on the scene at the time singing Bop, and that's about where my knowledge of pop music stops.
Let's do something fun on the podcast and analyze you psychoanalytically. So what was happening in your life in 1997?
Not safe.
Maybe
not
he doesn't want to say.
I was 10 years old. Okay.
Okay, you've said enough.
Said.
Let's see here. What else? So I noticed that in Genesis 10, as these groups are being described, there's this refrain, each by their own language. So verse 5, from the coastland people spread in their lands, each with his own language. And then like these are the sons of Shem by their clans, their languages, their lands, and their nations. we don't yet have. I mean, so again, chapter 11 tells us a lot about language, but do you think it's the case that part of God's design in the dispersion mandate is that languages would form, and in diversity of languages, so this is my hypothesis, in diversity of languages comes more accurate reflection, theological reflection. Could come more accurate theological reflection.
That's good. So in Revelation 7, John's vision, he sees all peoples and languages, right? And so does this get fixed in heaven? Or is it just we're able to understand each other just as Pentecost and you have this fuller reflection? Because this is always a constant struggle throughout church history between the Greeks and the Latins. And right, the Greeks have a much superior language because it's more precise. So
it would be interesting to tease out what each language is uniquely good at describing theologically.
Yeah, you're right. Now I get this question asked all the time. What do you think the language was that Adam and Eve were speaking?
What do you answer? What's the answer you give?
I say I don't know, but if I had to guess, Hebrew. So do you think that original language gets preserved, or do you think it all gets spread out?
We don't have a good idea, do we, of just how much dispersion was happening before the flood, right? Because if you keep people close together, there's going to be much more homogeneity in the language, right? It will deviate less over the course of time. So, think about language now. It's not going to change as rapidly as it did when you had people diverge even a century ago and not talk to each other. But because just as in America, everybody kind of speaks sitcom English, right? There's this normalization, this homogenization that happens when they're kept close together. So if there was not a lot of dispersion before the flood, Noah would probably have been speaking the same way Adam and Eve did, I would think.
This podcast is missing a laugh track. That's why it feels off. Have you ever watched YouTube clips of the sitcom Friends without the laugh track?
I've heard of that experiment. I've never done it.
It's so funny because of how unfunny it is.
You have to interject the humor, or make it so that people know the joke.
I've heard of this happening, and I have a hard time picturing it, but apparently some of my relatives went down to Texas one time, and from North Dakota and Minnesota, whatever, and people said they couldn't understand them. there was a language barrier. That was hard for me to comprehend. But
that sounds like an exaggeration. That is true though. Like for instance, in Germany, the German that's spoken in the north and the German that's spoken in the south, they put subtitles on the TV for the folks in the north when the folks in the south are on TV because it's hard to understand.
We were out in Denver for a wedding in February. At the reception, I said one sentence and a guy turned to me and goes, "You're from Minnesota," and picked it up,
Well, that's certainly how they pick up Peter.
Right. You're Galilean.
So, I want to know if he sounded like a Yankee, if the north-south dynamic always plays out. Did the Judeans speak with a draw? That's how I would design language in the universe. Now, I don't want to put God in my own image, but that's how I would do it. Now, you're going to have to help me out here with Shem, because I haven't mapped these things out. If this lines up with Esau's genealogy later in, is it Genesis 36, somewhere in that region? Because what you have, it's repeated there. I got to make sure these are the same people. But in verse 23, so this is from Shem, you've got Uz, and that's where Job is from the book of Job. And then we look at verse 29, so very closely connected. You've got Job-Ab, which I take that as Father Job, which makes sense. So he's got kids, as we know, in the book of Job, and he's a great king. In fact, according to later, he's an Edomite king, which makes the story make more sense because of all the riches he has. So I need to do some checking to see if this is the same thing that's lining up. Does it strike a bell?
Yeah, I'm just glancing here. Because of course in Esau's genealogy you've got the chiefs, and then the son. These are the sons of Dishan, which is so you've got these are the sons of Esau and their chiefs. These are the sons of Seir the Horite, right? And Seir is a synonym for Esau, and he's got 7 sons listed, one of whom is Dishan. The sons of Dishan are Uz and Aran. Yeah.
So Aram?
No, with an N on the end.
Oh, with an N. Okay. Interesting.
Yeah, but in Esau's genealogy, Uz and Aran are brothers. We don't have offspring of Uz listed. Interesting. You do have Jobab listed.
I love that name, Joe Bob. When I was in 4th grade, one of my favorite characters to draw, coming back, Bruce, to drawing, was a cow named Joe Bob. So do you want to psychoanalyze me?
Where did you come up with the name Jobab?
I just liked the combination. I don't know. I probably dreamed it up. I was really upset because the stockyards down in Fort Worth had a naming competition for their new mascot cow, and I submitted Joe Bob, and it didn't win.
So that
explains
rest of
a
Josh's
lot.
life is a history of suppressed trauma because of that. How old were you? 10 years old?
Yeah. See, it all happens at 10. Now, it wasn't the band Hanson that traumatized me, but nobody ever takes my suggestion seriously. And it just plays out over and over and over again.
What does that say to you, Josh? That no one takes your suggestions seriously?
I just say, they did it to Luther. That's what great Lutherans do. You excommunicate me, well, they excommunicated Luther. The details don't matter, but we have that in common. So I'm a Lutheran hero.
All right. We'll say, Bruce, as you were reading Genesis 10, did you have any other key observations that came to mind?
No, I did find it interesting. Like Leupold kind of goes through all these names and the different, at least speculated nations that come from, which so under Shem, Reber, the Hebrews there, Asher, the Assyrians. I mean, that's what he went through. Well, you got, as you said already, Uz, where Abraham was from. No, Job, I'm sorry. Abraham was not, he was from
of the Chaldees, which you get
the Chaldees, not.
That's
Right.
That's Babel, right?
Right, which is where the language Chaldean comes from. For the Babylonians, which will be, of course, Aramaic. So if you ever run into somebody talking about the Bible in Chaldean, probably avoid that person because they're probably a King James only nut, but you know that they're talking about Aramaic. Do you have this experience? What's your experience with King James only people?
I don't know too many of them.
I've got a joke, but I'll reserve it.
Did have acquaintance a long time ago, was kind of a self-ordained Baptist pastor, King James only, and I don't know of what, but he argued vociferously that the resurrection accounts were incorrect because it wasn't a totality of 3 days, and I don't know where that came from. That it wasn't 72 hours, but it was 36 hours. But when you're self-appointed, you can probably pick anything you want to argue about.
If he had listened to the Cloudcast, the archive, we addressed this very thing a few episodes ago. I mean, we're solving the world's problems. I've got a lot of questions about a self-ordained Baptist pastor.
Well, pretty much, yeah. Just thought the Lord was calling him, and he and his wife.
No, you can say no to this. Can you share your Jedi priest story on the podcast?
I can. It's up to you, though. I mean, I didn't. I told you all I'm good for is boomer stories.
Well, this is one of your best boomer stories. I think the audience would love to hear it.
So I was conducting a funeral meeting with the family in my office, and let's just say it was one of those families, sadly, where there was contention. And so I had to bring the family into my office to calm them down so that we could conduct the funeral service. And I knew everybody in the office, but near the door of my office, a guy was standing there that I did not know, that I had never seen, and he ended up being the boyfriend of one of the family members. And I looked at him and I said, "Who are you? And what are you doing in here?" because, you know, it was supposed to be family. And he said, there's nothing to worry about. I'm a Jedi priest. And at that, I just said, get out of my office. I did talk to him later in the narthex, and he said, I'm serious. I am an ordained Jedi priest. And where do you begin in a make-believe, you know, like make-believe world? But he truly and really believed he was a Jedi priest.
So what's great is that story would be exactly the same if he had said, I'm a self-ordained Baptist pastor. That would have been exactly the same story.
Get out of my office. No, I'm serious.
All of those words are made up. Self-ordained, Baptist.
Yeah. Uh-oh. You're going to offend some of our good friends.
That's all right. They knew it was
They're
coming.
not listening, are
If
they?
they haven't already been offended by Josh, they haven't been listening.
Right. So, did you change the salutation in the funeral service?
No, I did not. And yes, I just said,
I don't get the sense that you
There's
thought it was
nothing to
funny
see
at
here.
the time.
Yeah.
How long did it take you to laugh at that story?
I think I was laughing that same day when I went home and told my wife, and then I think at that time we had a deaconess, and she chuckled pretty hard at it too. She knew the family a little bit, but it did not take long, because I figured this was I don't think most people have had Jedi priests in their church, so you know
It's probably a fair assessment, but we're going to need Pew Research to do a study and tell us.
I don't think this guy would like those studies, because he might be offended by them.
Hey, David, did you get the poll for the active clergy in the Missouri Synod about our views on contentious topics, and did you fill it out? And did you get your $15 gift card?
I don't think I did. I think I would have remembered that one, and I don't remember seeing it. Now, what were the contentious issues that they wanted your position on?
I say contentious. These are just like hot button, usual suspects, mostly sexuality questions and transgenderism and that kind of thing. Asking questions as, do we know people in this community? Have we actively ministered to them? What are our viewpoints on it? Do we try to steer them into it or try to counsel them away to it? Do we call these things sin? Questions like that. Now, on the one hand, it is kind of sad that we have to take a poll like this. On the other hand, I really do appreciate doing this, because it's acknowledging, hey, maybe everything we teach on the books isn't actually what our clergy are teaching and practicing.
Yeah, there's a bit of a selection problem there too. It's striking to me. I was thinking about the need for pastors to talk to one another, because when you take a poll, like if you assess things based on poll work, you inevitably are selecting for those who are willing to participate, right? And people who hold aberrant views are less likely to participate, seems to me, by default. And so we do need to know what our teaching, whether our teaching comports with what's on the books. But the only way to actually know that is for pastors to talk to each other.
Sure. It's a brotherhood for a reason, right?
That's definitely the big challenge, though, is to talk, and to have the conversations. Because in a way, even the poll, and I don't know if it's going to get released in some time or if they're just using it to do some study or document. But even a poll, it's probably anonymous, maybe not. I guess they have your email address, but if you put down that you're not calling things a sin, or are you going to get visited by your ecclesiastical supervisor? I kind of doubt it. But it's not, it's not helpful without the conversation.
Aren't you a synodical official?
Not sort of real. I did check the lcms.org is updated. I am now the second vice president of Minnesota North, not the third vice president of Iowa West.
That's a bummer.
Yeah, but
2 bullets away.
Yes. Watch what you say.
Well, actually, if you line it up right, it could be 1.
That's true.
And this is not
okay.
no, I gotta clarify. Understand what I'm saying. I love Carl Weber, great man. He was the chair of my floor committee. I love Brady Finnern. I pray for both of them actively. They're great guys. I don't know if we say this enough, but our leadership in the district and in the circuit and everything, we've got it really really good, and just compared to the landscape across the country. So I'm thankful for both of you. By the way, not to get too sappy. I know.
Yeah.
Aw,
I know. It's really
making me
nice.
uncomfortable.
I know.
really? Come on, say something sarcastic so I don't feel like verklempt or something, you know.
Well, there is one church practice. So, how many pink chasubles do you own?
Just one, and it's rose, but it really looks like Breast Cancer Awareness Month.
Isn't it pronounced rosé?
Think so. Yeah, okay, now we're getting there.
Okay. All right. So let's just anything else about Genesis 10? Otherwise, I want to hear. I want to hear what we haven't asked the question. What really grinds your gears lately? But I would like to know what you're reading at present. Josh, I think you were reading some Plato still, right?
Yeah. Yep. I just I finished Phaedo, and that was fun. And you see where Augustine gets his idea for purgatory from. If Augustine espouses to purgatory, it's unclear. But he does make some passing references to this idea. So Phaedo says, what happens? This is Plato talking in Phaedo. What happens to the soul after you die is there's 4 rivers. I wonder where he got that idea from. That is just so weird. But you die, and then depending on how you lived your life, if you were super, super, super good, then you get to be detached from your body, and then your soul just gets to be, quote unquote, in heaven, living among the forms. You're no longer constrained. If you were kind of good, then you got to go through this purging process, and kind of bad, you still got to go through this purging process. But if you were really bad, straight to jail, straight to hell, no hope for you. And so there's this sorting process, which Augustine describes later. It was fun, obviously wrong.
Do you think that is? Go ahead, Bruce.
So are the levels of suffering in the flesh, but once you get out, if you can get out, then you're separated from the flesh, or are these all only spiritual sufferings or non-corporal or whatever?
I think the suffering happens to you through the body, because that's the constraining thing. Because Plato, he makes an argument for the pre-existence of the soul. Now, the argument is interesting, and of course, this is what Origen gets condemned for later on. So all of the early church fathers are reading the philosophers and deciding what to do with them. But his argument is interesting. He says, learning is recollection. So when you learn something, you realize, oh, I'm just recalling something that I already knew from the past. And so his argument then is, clearly we've existed before we took on this body, and then the body is what's really bad. Now, you see the Gnostics really take off with this in another direction. So we were good before, and then we took on the body that was constraining, and then Socrates and Phaedo is happy to die because he thinks he's a really, really, really good philosopher, and so he's going to be at bliss.
Is the thing that makes him a really, really good philosopher that he acknowledges what he does not know, or he's a humble philosopher? Is that, or what's his criteria for his goodness?
Well, that's a good question. I haven't thought about it. I would say the typical things about, so Plato's dialectic is reaching this higher state of knowledge. So understanding the forms. So not letting the passions in your body control you. So not being led around by your hunger or your desire for sex or things like that.
Do you think that this kind of moralism and understanding of the relationship between the appetites and the intellect, say, do you think that there's a universal character to that kind of religion? Is Pieper right that there are 2 religions? There's a religion of the law, which something about our fallen, sinful human flesh craves something to do, something attainable that it can accomplish to set itself apart in righteousness. And that's how you can summarize every other religion.
I think so. We've had this conversation before. What that assumes is that people actually want to go to heaven, that they believe there is an afterlife. So using that framework, if salvation is the goal, then I do think there are only two kinds of religion. What's really depressing about starting with Nietzsche is the black pill nihilism, where people don't even want to go to heaven.
Yeah. You're right. I asked you that very question once before, didn't I? You answered it the same way. Good job.
I don't know if it was.
That was a test.
I don't know if it was on the podcast or not. I can't remember.
Okay.
Really then makes the third category. There's for many people, and I think Josh has asked that, they're not thinking at all about that. It's not a question that ever enters into their mindset.
Right. So when the young man runs up to Jesus, "Teacher, what must I do to inherit eternal life?" Or this is how the parable of the Good Samaritan starts too, right? The classic Lutheran thing to do is to tear this guy to pieces and say, "Oh, what do you mean? What must I do?" And notice that that's not what Jesus really addresses. He's like, "Oh, you want to go to heaven? That's great. Let me tell you this story then."
So I want to hypothesize that that third category actually isn't a third category. That the indifference is a result of a cope that produces kind of a numbness. So for instance, like if you're operating with a moralistic framework that bears down on you, so I've got to do something. There are things you can do to feel that less, right? And one of those things is to kind of like inculcate a certain indifference. You could do that chemically, right? I mean, people do that. This is what alcohol and drugs are accomplishing, right? You can inculcate that indifference, but that inculcation is a result of the fact that you have this moral framework that you're trying to manage.
Well, that's good. So you're saying that they want heaven on earth, and so this transcendence, this heaven, is going to come about through mind-altering substances.
Yeah, or maybe they want to avoid hell on earth. Like I don't know that it's optimistic.
Oh, glad you brought that up. So all these stats I was looking at from Pew Research, fascinating. I never know how much stock to put into it, but what really stuck out at me was, so only 33% of American Christians read the Bible every week, while 64% of American Christians say the Bible is extremely important. Both of those numbers are too low. But 60% of American Christians claim that they pray every single week. Interesting. But then the question is, how many American Christians believe in hell? 70%. And so more people believe in hell than pray every week.
So now, okay, fascinating. There's a lot to unpack there. I want to think about the definitions of those terms. Like lots of people imagine they are praying when they're not, right? Too. So that number should be, I would make it even lower, right?
Sure.
I would guess. Yeah. Interesting. Bruce, what are you reading?
Well, the last book I finished was Milton's Paradise Lost, which I think is going to need to be a regular read. A lot of I think there'd be some good preachability stuff in there, just like and I got imagining how things went wrong or why they did, and the devil's ploys and Adam and Eve's interaction. I think that was all. Right now, I'm reading a book. I can't exactly remember the name, but it's a collection of stories about the last people doing something in the world of that's unique to their culture. So the last bridge builder of the Incan civilization who's building bridges out of woven grass, or the last night watchman who climbs to the top of a church tower in this little town of Sweden, and so this last group of people, I think in India, who make a mirror, that puts to shame any, mechanically produced mirror. So it's just kind of a human interest story, but
isn't that a Daniel Day-Lewis movie? The Last of the Mohicans?
Yeah, okay. Could be. Yeah.
Sorry,
or the last of Us.
Oh.
I am aware of that. Is that an up-to-date cultural reference for you, or?
That's great. Yeah. Tell me more. What's the utility? What are you getting out of it?
I don't know, just how these people hold on to something. It's passed on from generation to generation. Almost all of the night watchman, his dad did the job, his grandfather did the job. The same with the last bridge builder of the Incan. And they do something to preserve a bit of their culture when, like there's obviously all these closed circuit cameras, phone systems that are around now, fire alarms. So why do you need a night watchman? Um, and then the same with the like 20 yards away from this grass bridge that's rebuilt every year because it has to be. There's a steel girder bridge, and so there is, but there is something that drives these people to hold on to, what they have received. And then, of course, I think the fear, like they're going to be the last one. Like they look to their children or their children's children, and nobody wants to do this. I mean, there's, and often these are quite poor. I mean, at least the ones I've read so far in the book are in quite poor culture. So the children are leaving to go, set about, make wealth, support their families, and not live in this simplistic lifestyle.
Who do you think's happier? The generation that holds on to these things, or?
Absolutely. I mean, you talk to them, or you hear their stories, and they're proud. They learned something. People depend on them, and and many people gather around them in support of them. So I do think the people who have held on. So maybe there's something to say for tradition and their culture, keeping something alive.
Does this resonate with you because you manually reload bullets?
Sure. Actually, this weekend was a good weekend. I cast probably 600-700 bullets, and yesterday I started powder coating them, so they'll soon be ready to be reloaded. But yeah, I save no money, but it's kind of the working with lead, especially. Well, yeah. Okay, Josh, don't say anything about it might affected my mind. I do wear a mask when I'm over the fumes.
That's the only time you wear a mask, buddy.
Yeah. Well, and when I'm out doing my Dark Knight duties. But
have you ever seen Bruce, Timm, and Batman in the same room, David?
That's a good question. I'd never considered, and no.
Bruce, have you ever made a bullet out of urine? That's a thing, isn't it?
I have never heard of that. Huh. Maybe my son would know as a firearms officer. I don't know. I've never I could see a paintball maybe filled with something like that.
My goodness. All right.
This is good. David, what are you reading?
Yeah, what are you reading?
Yeah, buddy.
I'm reading a book about parasites and how difficult they are to study. Well, this is the introduction. Is how difficult they are to study because their means for propagation are so unorthodox, right? So like, how do you you have to be watching at just the right moment to see when they make the leap from one host to the next. So it's really
I'm reading that book about the Anabaptists too.
Okay, leave my Anabaptists alone. Leave them out of this. All right.
Oh, sorry. Keep going.
I'm also reading a James Herriot, that warm-hearted English veterinarian. All God's creatures. His stories from the farm. He's a great writer. I'm enjoying his beautiful prose and his reflections on human nature. So he tells this one story, this great story, and the way he tells it is fantastic. He shows up at the farm that he got a call in the middle of dinner because the cow's leg was broken. The farmer says, so he had just finished describing how lovely the Yorkshire pudding was and how it's always followed by the beef. And he didn't get to the beef, and his Yorkshire pudding was going to be put in the oven, and it was going to get baked to a crisp. But he had to go because he got the call. So he shows up at the farm, and the farmer's not there. And he asks his wife, he says, where is he? And she goes, well, he had to go into town to the bar to make the phone call. And he probably ran into some guys while he's there. And so, he'll be a little while. And the doctor says, well, I haven't had my dinner yet. And she says, well, that's okay. We already ate. As if that was supposed to console him. So good. And then, of course, there's this time that goes by. Finally, the guy comes from the bar and he's telling the stories about how many pints he had to drink. And the one guy bought him a pint, and so he had to buy him one too. And then, of course, this comes up again. James is like, Harriet's like, can you show me the cow? I haven't eaten my dinner yet. And the farmer goes, well, that's okay. We already ate beforehand. And Harriet goes, oh, I'm so glad that you had the chance to eat dinner. And the smiles on the farmer and his wife's faces indicated that they did not understand the sarcasm. They thought it was like a genuine comment on his happiness for them. Hilarious. It's just like and of course it's so good-hearted, so good-humored. It's really makes me feel warm and fuzzy inside. So that's why I'm reading it.
Is the Buchs family farm ever going to do like a choose your own lobster thing with pigs?
That's a great idea. Yeah. I'll consider it.
Curious, David, does the librarian, wherever you pick up these books, know when the books come in that you request, she doesn't even have to look up to see who ordered them? Like if she sees, parasites or animal husbandry or some weird study on viruses, she just knows it's yours.
I'm a huge patron, huge fan, loving patron of the Great River Regional Library System. I had it returned to me as secondhand knowledge once. Somebody said to me, oh yeah, I ran into the librarian and they said, that Pastor Buchs borrows some strange books.
What was the book that you requested from Arizona?
That was a book by, now we're going to get taken off of YouTube. It was about vaccines. Suzanne Humphreys is a nephrologist who was writing about her experiences in studying immunology. Once she realized a correlation between kidney failure and vaccine history in her patients. She was interviewed by Joe Rogan recently, and so I requested her book.
I don't think we'll get taken off. I think we'll just be demonetized, which, by the way, where's my royalty check, David?
I think we have to have about 7,000 times more viewers before we get monetized.
7,000? No kidding. Huh. That's a great number. We'll work on that.
I think you guys should be happy when you get 70.
Wait, I will be.
We will, yes. Hey Bruce, this was great. Thanks for coming on. You'll be a regular customer.
Well, I don't know about that, but
thank
you guys for having me and letting me regale you with at least one story.
I can't wait for the more.
All right, I'm going to hit stop.